Hey everyone, drop a comment and tell us where you're listening from. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Now, let's dive into today's story. At her nephew's birthday party, my mother-in-law decided that this was the perfect moment to humiliate Kazaya publicly. Everyone here has children, she announced proudly. Except her. She's the only one who's useless. My husband said nothing. That night, he kicked me out. 3 years later, I returned to my hometown with twins in my arms, and you should have seen their faces when they learned who the father actually was. But to understand how everything fell apart, we have to go back to the day that split Kazaya's life in two. A day that started with hope, and ended in cold rain and a slamming door. The Onyx Lounge was buzzing like a disturbed hive. Cairo, Xavier's nephew, was turning 5, and the entire St. Clare clan had gathered not to celebrate the child, but to display their wealth, power, and perfect family legacy. Children ran between tables in sharp suits and glittering dresses. Laughter and perfume filled the air. Kazaya sat quietly at a table, fingers twisting beneath the cloth, feeling like an outsider in a world built for everyone except her. Everywhere she looked there were families, mothers rocking babies, fathers tossing toddlers into the air, women comparing pregnancy stories, and then there was her, 32 years old, 5 years married, and still childless. A reminder everyone seemed obligated to mention. Xavier's aunt, wrapped in a blinding burgundy outfit, waddled over and engulfed Kazaya in a hug full of sugary perfume. Kazaya, darling, why are you sitting all alone like an orphan? Go look at the babies. It's your turn now. Actually, it's past your turn. That clock is ticking. Sweetheart. Heat climbed up her neck. She gave a weak smile. That was jab number 4 of the evening. First, the business partner's wife, still not planning. Then a cousin. Better hurry. My daughter almost missed her chance. Every word another pebble thrown at her emptiness. She scanned the room until she spotted Xavier, relaxed, laughing at the bar with his cousin Langston. He looked happy, completely unaware of how broken she felt. This morning's doctor's visit echoed in her mind. Keep trying. It should work, eventually. Years of tests, procedures, tears, and Zenobia, her mother-in-law, only made it worse. Zenobia St. Clare was in her element. Dressed like royalty, she drifted through the room, granting icy smiles. She hadn't spoken to Kazaya directly. She never did. Her attacks were sharper when hidden inside innocent comments spoken loudly enough for one person to hear. The cake arrived, a pirate ship taller than the birthday boy. Children squealed with delight. Cairo blew out the candles. Applause thundered. Then Zenobia stepped forward. Look at this joy, she declared. All of us building a legacy. All of us contributing. Except one. She turned, her cold eyes settling on Kazaya. You, Kazaya, are the only one who is useless to us. The room went silent. Kazaya's vision blurred. Dozens of eyes burned into her, but she looked only at Xavier, begging, waiting, praying, say something, defend me. Don't let her do this. But he didn't even look at her. He calmly picked at his salad. His silence was the loudest answer of all. The party resumed around her. Music and laughter washing over her like a tidal wave she couldn't escape. But inside, something had shattered. The drive home was suffocatingly silent. Rain hung heavy in the air. City lights smeared across the windows. Xavier's face was hard, closed, unreachable. In the hallway of their apartment, he finally spoke. Mother is right, he said emotionlessly. I need a real family. She turned to him in shock. What, Xavier? What are you saying? Pack your things. The words hit her like a punch to the ribs. Where will I go? She whispered. That's not my problem. He stepped aside. You have 30 minutes. He watched her pack like a guard watching a prisoner. No help. No hesitation. No remorse. When she zipped her duffel bag, he opened the front door silently, an unspoken command. Get out. The door slammed behind her with a finality that echoed through her bones. Cold rain soaked her instantly as she stepped into the night. She walked aimlessly, numb, broken, her mind replaying his words. Useless. I need a real family. Under the flickering awning of a corner store, she finally stopped. Her hands trembled as she dug through her bag for a tissue. Her fingers brushed something small and hard. A little cardboard box. Her breath stopped. She pulled it out, with shaking hands, the pregnancy test she had taken that morning. She had bought it, after the doctor's encouraging words, taken it in the mall restroom. 2 bright lines. She had stared at them, stunned, overjoyed, overwhelmed. She had planned to tell Xavier tonight, their secret victory, their miracle, their hope, and now Now she stood in the freezing rain, homeless, rejected, humiliated, clutching the one thing that proved she had been wrong about everything, except the baby. She opened the box. Inside the box lay the small plastic test with 2 unmistakable lines. She was pregnant, and the man who had thrown her out into the cold, calling her barren and useless, was the father of this child. The joy she had guarded so closely, her one ray of hope, had twisted into something painful, sharp, almost cruel. 2 bright lines stared back at her from her rain-soaked hand like a silent truth the world wanted her to choke on. Kazaya looked at them, and the world that had shattered around her suddenly held still. It didn't fall any further, it simply hung there in a cold, suspended moment. She wasn't alone anymore. Inside her was life. His life, a child he didn't want from a woman he rejected. A humorless laugh rose in her throat but never escaped. The rain was freezing, cutting through her thin coat. She couldn't stay outside, but where could she go? Her parents lived nearby, but if she went to them, the scandal would reach them instantly and Zenobia would make sure it spread like wildfire. She pictured her mother in tears, her father grim and silent, weighed down by the humiliation of a daughter abandoned by her husband. No, she couldn't put that burden on them. One name surfaced through the chaos: Iana, her college friend. They hadn't been close lately, but their friendship was the kind that didn't rust with time. Iana lived in Savannah, far safe, out of reach of gossip. Kazaya dug out her nearly dead phone and dialed. The ringing stretched forever. "Hello," Iana's groggy voice answered. "Iana, it's me," Kazaya croaked, sounding like a stranger to herself. "Kazaya, what happened? Are you crying? Iana, can I stay with you? Just for a couple of days." The words trembled out of her. There was a moment of silence, and then Iana's voice came back steady, warm, and sure. "Not for a few days. For as long as you need, just come." Those simple words held more kindness than her entire marriage had ever given her. Kazaya ended the call before her emotions spilled over. Her phone died immediately afterward. Savannah, that meant heading to the train station. She waved down a late-night cab, gave the driver the Amtrak station address, and stared at the city lights blurring past her former home, now feeling like an enemy territory. She was leaving everything behind. The apartment she decorated with love. The life she tried to build. The husband she thought she knew. The night train was nearly empty. She curled up by the window, clutching her small bag like a life raft. She couldn't sleep. 2 words kept circling her mind. Useless and pregnant. Clashing, battling, refusing to let her breathe. By dawn, as the train rolled toward Savannah, something inside her shifted. The pain was still there, but a cold, hard layer of anger began forming over it. They would never know. Not Xavier, not Zenobia. They had erased her from their lives, now she would erase them from hers. This child would be hers alone. She would protect them from the family that spit her out. They would never meet the father who rejected them before they existed, or the grandmother who mocked their mother's worth. This was her unbreakable. Iana met her at the platform, wrapped her in a hug, took her bag, and led her home without asking a single question. The tiny apartment smelled like coffee and peace, a world far from the storm she fled. Kazaya told her everything. Almost everything. She hid only the pregnancy test buried deep in her bag. That secret was hers. The first weeks drifted by like fog. She slept, helped around the house, stayed quiet. Iana never pried. She simply existed beside her like a warm anchor. But hiding wasn't living. Kazaya needed to rebuild for herself and for the tiny heartbeat inside her. First step. A doctor. Using her maiden name, she visited a regular women's clinic. Sitting among pregnant women with glowing smiles and wedding rings, she felt like an outsider. They had support, she had nothing but the past she ran from, and a blurry, uncertain future. The ultrasound room was cool. The doctor applied gel and moved the probe. "Let's take a look." She murmured. Kazi, held her breath, staring at the screen. A normal uterine pregnancy. About 12 weeks. Heartbeat is strong. Relief washed over her, then the doctor paused, frowning but not in worry. "Well now, that's interesting," she said with a small smile. "Mama, you've got a surprise." Kazia's stomach clenched. "What? Surprise?" The doctor turned the screen to her. "You don't have one heartbeat. You have to." Kazaya blinked at the blurry image. The doctor pointed. "One here, and another here. Congratulations, you're having twins." Twins. The world tilted. Not one child but 2. Her secret doubled. Her fear doubled. Her hope doubled. Tears slipped down her cheeks. A strange mix of terror and joy. She was alone, broke, unemployed, in a strange city, and carrying twins. Madness and The most beautiful miracle she'd ever been given. Back at Ayana's place, she unpacked her bag to make room for future baby things. Her old life was reduced to a handful of clothes, a few books, and a small, battered notebook. She recognized it instantly. Pearl St. Clare's diary. Xavier's grandmother. She had meant to return it to Zenobia years ago, but forgot. Somehow, it ended up in her bag. She almost tossed it into the trash. It was a relic of the life she wanted to erase. But something pulled her back. She opened it. Most entries were simple notes: weather, garden, family. Then one page snatched her breath away. Zenobia's name. An entry from decades ago, when Xavier was still a child. May 15th, another difficult conversation with Zenobia. She started again about needing an heir. My heart aches for my son Thomas. The doctors say the chances are small but not impossible. Zenobia looks unwell with obsession. Yesterday she said that if her husband can't do it, then solutions must be found, because the family name must survive at any cost. I fear her. There is something dark in her eyes. A fire not blessed by God. She seems ready to do anything. Kazaya read the lines twice, 3 times. Thomas Xavier's father had fertility issues, and Zenobia's obsession with producing an heir had started decades before Kazaya ever entered the picture. It had never been about Kazir. It was an old sickness running through the St. Clare bloodline. Her humiliation wasn't personal, it was a tradition. Cold shiver ran down her spine. She snapped the diary shut. Whatever this was, whatever twisted legacy she married into, it was no longer her problem. Xavier would never know about the twins, and they would never know him. No, that door was shut. The past had to stay buried. Old family dramas, coincidences, curses, none of it mattered anymore. She didn't have the strength to chase ghosts. She had 2 secrets of her own that would soon enter the world. Instead of reading further, she shoved the diary deep into her bag beneath folded sweaters, out of sight and out of mind. That same evening, trying to silence the storm inside her, she did the one thing that had always brought her peace. She went into the kitchen and made a peach cobbler, simple, warm, comforting, just like her mother used to bake. Soon, the apartment filled with the soft smell of cinnamon, vanilla, and bubbling peaches. When Ayana returned from work and tasted it, she gasped. The cobbler was divine. The next day Kazaya asked Ayana to bring more flour and sugar, and then she baked again. Cakes, muffins, rolls, at first only for herself and Ayana, but then Ayana began taking them to work, and her co-workers were amazed. The first birthday order arrived, then another, then another. Kazaya baked day and night. Her back ached, her eyes burned, but whenever she pulled a golden creation out of the oven, a quiet pride washed over her. She was making something with her hands, something real, something that belonged to her. Money trickled in, small but hers. She was no longer an accessory to a husband. She was Kazaya Price, and soon she would be the mother of not 1, but 2 children. That thought gave her strength. She forced away memories of Zenobia's words, Xavier's silence, and the haunting lines in the old diary. Instead, she poured all her love and all her desperation into dough, cream, and chocolate glaze. She was building a new life from absolute zero. 3 years passed. 3 years that transformed Kazaya from a shattered woman into the owner of her own destiny. The aroma of vanilla, fresh coffee, and dark chocolate became the scent of her rebirth. Kazaya's Sweets, in downtown Savannah, became her sanctuary and her pride. A cozy bakery glowing with delicate pastries and stunning cakes. A small landmark known by everyone in the neighborhood. She was no longer Xavier's wife. She was Ms. Price, the woman who baked heavenly eclairs. Her mornings didn't begin with an alarm. They began with tiny rustlings in the nursery. Kenzo and Kalia, her double miracles, her heartbeat outside her body. Light-skinned, identical dimples but different souls. Kenzo, curious and outspoken. Kalia, quiet and observant. Each morning she took them to daycare, then dove into work, managing staff, creating new recipes, taking custom orders. Evenings were theirs, dinner together, storybooks, sleepy kisses, and as they drifted off to sleep, she felt a deep, complete happiness. She had made it, she had survived. The past was locked away in an old diary, at the bottom of a suitcase, and in the part of her heart she refused to revisit. She knew nothing of Xavier or Zenobia anymore, and she preferred it that way. She had cut every tie, changed her phone number. Only rare calls to her parents, always from Ayana's landline, kept the connection alive. She told them she was working. She was fine. She never mentioned the children. She feared the news would spread, would reach the St. Clares. She would protect her children at any cost. Then one evening, A phone call shattered her new peace. It was her father. His voice was strained, trembling. "Kazaya, your mother. It's bad. Her heart, she's in the hospital." Her world tilted. Her mother, her only true safe place. Heart attack. The words felt like hail beating against her skull. There was no time for fear, doubt, or old wounds. Her mother needed her. Within an hour, she packed the children, informed her assistant she had to leave for family reasons, and booked the next train. All night, to the rhythm of the tracks, she watched Kenzo and Kalia sleeping and felt terror battling with worry. She was returning to the place she'd fought so hard to escape. Her hometown greeted her with gray skies and wet wind. Nothing had changed. Only she had. When her father met her at the station and saw the two toddlers holding her hands, he froze. Shock, confusion, and tenderness flickered in his eyes. "These," he whispered. "Your grandchildren?" "Daddy," she replied softly. "Kenzo and Kalia." In the hospital, her mother looked fragile and small, but when she saw her grandchildren, her pale face broke into a glowing smile that stole Kazia's breath. She had done the right thing. This moment alone made the return worth it. But the town had already noticed. Small towns breathe gossip. And the next day, on her way to buy groceries, Miss Jenkins from the old building stared wide-eyed at the children. "Kazia, baby, you're back. And whose precious little angels are these?" Kazia smiled politely and walked away, but she knew the truth. The rumor machine had started. By evening, everyone would know. Kazaya Price, once St. Clare, thrown out by her husband, was back with 2 children. She avoided going out. She stayed with her mother or with the children at her parents' place. But soon the doctor insisted her mother needed fresh fruit, especially pomegranates. So she went to the central market. The market buzzed with vendors and scented air. Kazia walked confidently with the children, choosing the ripest pomegranates. She was paying when Kenzo tugged her sleeve. "Mama, look, a man." She turned and froze. Xavier was a few yards away. He looked almost the same. The haircut she used to admire. The coat she once helped him choose. Only now, his expression was harder, older. He stared at her, truly stared, shock carved into every line of his face. His eyes jumped from her to the 2 light-skinned toddlers clutching her hands, then back again. His face drained of color. But he wasn't alone. A beautiful young woman stood beside him, glossy dark hair, flawless makeup, a sand-colored cashmere coat. She looked expensive, polished, confident. She looked first at Xavier's frozen face, then at Kazir. An entire lifetime passed in a heartbeat before Xavier managed to speak. "Kazia, Xavier," she replied, her voice unnervingly steady, even as the inside of her chest clenched into ice. She instinctively pulled the children closer to her. Xavier looked helplessly between her and his companion. He seemed lost, searching for the next word. Finally, "This is Sarah, my wife." Wife. The word cracked across her like a slap. So this was the replacement. The one who fit the mold. The one he deemed worthy of keeping while throwing her into the rain. Kazaya looked at Sarah's flawless face, her luxurious coat, and felt the old pain rise. But something else rose higher. Cold, fierce pride. "Hello," she said sharply, not even glancing at Sarah. Her eyes stayed locked on Xavier. He couldn't stop looking at the children. Shock, confusion, dawning realization flickered in his eyes. He opened his mouth but no words came. The moment stretched painfully. "We should go," he finally muttered, grabbing Sarah's arm and almost dragging her away. He didn't even say goodbye. He fled. As they walked off, Sarah said something confusedly to him. As they turned a corner, Kazaya noticed something that made her stomach twist. The loose cashmere coat couldn't hide the truth. Sarah was pregnant. Very pregnant. Xavier hadn't just replaced her. He had built a new family, one that Zenobia had always wanted from her. The one Kazaya, in their eyes, had failed to give. She stood frozen, gripping the pomegranates in one hand, her children's palms in the other. The sight burned into her mind like a camera flash, a picture of her supposed worthlessness, and the triumph of the new, correct wife. Rage rose inside her, not for herself, but for Kenzo and Kalia. Their father had discarded their mother without ever knowing they existed. She turned and walked away. That moment at the market triggered an avalanche. The town erupted with gossip. Everyone now knew Kazaya had returned with 2 children no one had ever seen, and Zenobia St. Clare was about to be a father again with someone else. Rumors crawled everywhere, and Kazia knew. It was only a matter of time before the Mozboy Sunas source reached her. She was right, it happened just a few days later. Mom's discharge was only a few days away. and to give the children some fresh air. Kazaya took them to the small square near the house. Kenzo and Kalia ran after pigeons, laughing loudly, while she sat on a bench, absorbing a rare moment of calm. She was so focused on watching them that she didn't notice the tall figure in a familiar black coat until a cold, venomous voice sliced through the air. "I knew you'd come crawling back. Ran out of money." Kazaya lifted her head slowly. Zenobia St. Clare. She looked exactly the same as 3 years ago, perfect hair, stiff posture, and eyes now even sharper, even crueler. Her gaze slid over Kazaya with disgust and then landed on the children. "So you dragged someone else's bastards here, planning to guilt my son into pity, hoping to pass off another man's children as his?" The words struck like a slap. 3 years ago, they would have shattered her, but not now. Kazaya rose to her full height, meeting Zenobia eye to eye, calm, steady, unshaken. "These are my children, Mrs. St. Clare, and you will stay away from them, and from me." Zenobia scoffed loudly. "Are you threatening me? You've thrown out like a stray cat. You came back to blackmail us, shame us before the birth of the rightful heir. I will not allow it." She raised her voice so passersby could hear, but Kazaya didn't flinch. "I came for my sick mother. Your delusions don't concern me. Come near my children again, and I'll call the police." She called Kenzo and Kalia, took their hands, and walked out of the park without looking back. She felt Zenobia's burning hatred behind her, but she didn't stop. She knew exactly what this was, an open declaration of war. Back home, after putting the kids to bed, she sat in the kitchen long after the tea went cold. Zenobia would not stop. She would twist the truth, poison every ear in the city, paint Kazaya as a scammer and her children as illegitimate. No, this time, she would not be the one cornered. She would strike first out the next morning. She contacted a reputable lawyer she found online. Ms. Davis, young and sharp, listened to her story without interrupting. "They'll accuse you of lying," Ms. Davis said. "You need to move before they do. File for official paternity establishment and child support. A DNA test will silence every accusation." A DNA test. It meant letting Xavier's existence pierce her world again, but it was necessary. This wasn't about money. It was about truth. About protecting her children. "Prepare the documents," she said. A few days later, Zenobia St. Clare received a court notice demanding a paternity test. The first shot had been fired. Kazaya braced herself for the storm. She expected screaming calls, threats, accusations. Instead, something far stranger happened. Late that night, after the twins were asleep, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Soraya Xavier's new wife standing alone. Gone was the polished elegance she'd seen at the market. She looked pale, exhausted, almost frightened. Dressed in a simple dark dress, hair pulled into a messy bun, Kazaya opened the door cautiously. I need to speak with you," Soraya whispered. "Please, not here." Kazaya led her into the kitchen, but her arms stayed crossed, her face unreadable. Soraya looked around nervously, like prey sensing danger. "I'm here about the lawsuit," she said. "Xavier received the papers." "So?" Soraya stepped closer. "I'm begging you, withdraw it please. Please drop the case." Kazaya laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "So you can keep telling the whole town my children aren't his. So your mother-in-law can keep calling them bastards." "No, never. It's not that," Soraya cried, voice cracking. "You don't understand. This test, it will destroy everything. For me, for Xavier, for you two." Her hands trembled as she placed her bag on the table. She opened a leather briefcase packed with money. "Take it," she pleaded. "Buy a home somewhere else. Anywhere. Just leave. Withdraw the case. Go far away." Kazaya stared. This wasn't arrogance. This was fear, raw and desperate. "You think you can buy me?" she said quietly. "Take your money and go." Tears filled Soraya's eyes. "You don't know what Zenobia is capable of. You don't understand what this test could reveal. You don't know what's at stake." Her panic made no sense. The paternity test should protect her. Why was she terrified of it? Unless she had a secret of her own, one that a DNA test could accidentally expose. "Leave," Kazaya said, pointing at the door. "Now." Soraya gathered the briefcase with shaking hands and left without another word. After locking every bolt, Kazaya stood with her back to the door, heart pounding. What was Soraya hiding? Why would she say the test would ruin everything for all of us? Unless the St. Clare family had secrets deeper and darker than anything she imagined. The panic, the diary, Zenobia's obsession with an heir, her husband's problem, her willingness to do anything. Pieces of a nightmare puzzle began assembling in her mind. She needed answers, someone who knew the family's history well enough to give them Dr. Thaddeus, their old family doctor. Her parents' friend, the St. Clare family doctor before they became powerful, someone who had seen everything. Using a checkup for the kids as cover, she visited him the next day in his old house. The office smelled of medicine and old books. He examined the twins, praised their health, and let them wander to the aquarium. Only then did she speak. Dr. Thaddeus, I found something. Pearl St. Clare's old diary. And as she said the name, the old doctor's expression changed, ever so slightly. The truth was beginning to surface. Mom was supposed to be discharged soon, so Kazaya, taking advantage of the clear sky, brought the children to the small square near the house. Kenzo and Kalia ran after pigeons, laughing freely, while she sat on a bench and breathed in a rare moment of peace. She was so focused on watching them that she didn't notice the tall figure in a familiar black coat stop beside her. I knew you'd crawl back. A cold, venomous voice cut through the air. Ran out of money. Kazaya slowly lifted her head. Zenobia St. Clare. She looked exactly as she had 3 years ago. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect arrogance. Only her eyes had grown even sharper, even crueler. She examined Kazaya with open disdain before shifting her gaze to the children. So you dragged these brats out here to make my son pity you, trying to pass off someone else's children as his? The words hit like a slap. 3 years ago, Kazaya would have wilted, cried, maybe even run away. But the woman sitting on that bench now was not the same. She had built her life alone, raised 2 children, and fought through every storm. Kazaya stood. She and Zenobia were the same height. She looked her mother-in-law directly in the eyes, calm, cold, unshaken. These are my children, Mrs. St. Clare, and I need you to stay away from the man from me. Zenobia's lip curled. Are you threatening me? You, whom my son threw out like an unwanted stray. You crawled back here to shame us before the birth of the rightful heir. I will not allow it. Her voice rose, drawing the attention of people passing by. But Kazaya didn't flinch. I came because my mother is sick, she said clearly, and your fantasies don't concern me. If you come near me or my children again, I will call the police. She called her children, took them by the hand, and walked out of the park without looking back. She could feel Zenobia's hateful stare burning into her back. And she knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of war. Back home, once the children were settled, she sat in the kitchen, her hands trembling. Zenobia would not stop. She would spread rumors, poison people's minds, label her a liar, a schemer, and the worst part, the insults aimed at her children. Another man's brood. If Zenobia started screaming that everywhere, she had to protect herself. And the best defense was attack. The next day, she found a reputable lawyer online. Ms. Davis, young and sharp, listened without interrupting. They'll claim you're a fraud, she said calmly when Kazaya finished. That the children aren't his and you want money. It's predictable. So we strike first. We file for paternity and child support through the court. A DNA test. The thought made her sick. It meant allowing Xavier back into their lives, even formally. But Ms. Davis was right. It was the only way to shut Zenobia's mouth once and for all. A document proving the truth. A document proving her children's bloodline. This wasn't about money. She was doing just fine on her own. This was about dignity and protection. Prepare the paperwork, she said firmly. Days later, a court order landed on Xavier St. Clare's office desk. She had pulled the trigger. Now, there was no going back. She braced for an explosion, an angry call. Zenobia's threats. Instead, something she never expected happened. Late that evening, after the children were asleep, the doorbell rang. Kazaya looked through the peephole and froze. Standing outside was Soraya, Xavier's pregnant wife. Alone, gone was the polished arrogance she had seen before. Tonight she wore a plain dark dress, hair shoved into a messy bun. Makeupless, face pale with fear. Kazaya hesitated, then opened the door. What do you want? She asked, voice like ice. Please, Soraya whispered. Let me come in. I don't want to talk in the hallway. Kazaya stepped aside. She didn't offer a seat, didn't offer tea. She waited. Soraya's hands shook as she clutched her bag. It's about the lawsuit, she said. Xavier got the papers. So, Soraya took a step forward, voice cracking. I'm begging you, withdraw it. Please drop the case. A humorless laugh escaped Kazaya. So you and your mother-in-law can keep spreading lies. No, it's not that, Soraya whispered. You don't understand. She opened her bag, pulled out a leather briefcase, unlocked it, and revealed stacks of cash. Take it, enough to buy an apartment, anywhere. Just withdraw the application. Leave please. Kazaya stared not at the money, but at Soraya's face. This wasn't arrogance. This was terror. Do you think I can be bought? She asked quietly. I won't take your money. You don't know what Zenobia is capable of, Soraya cried. This test it will destroy everything, for all of us. For me, for Xavier, for you too. The words made no sense. Why would the pregnant wife fear a test that would prove her child's position? Unless she had her own terrible secret. Get out, Kazaya said, pointing to the door. Tears spilled down Soraya's cheeks as she snapped the case shut and hurried out. Kazaya locked every lock and leaned against the door. Heart pounding. What was Soraya hiding? What was Zenobia afraid of? Why would a DNA test ruin everything? Logic shattered. Nothing made sense unless something monstrous lurked beneath the surface. She remembered the old diary in her suitcase, Xavier's grandmother's diary, the entry about Zenobia's obsession with an heir, her husband's problems, her willingness to do anything. Back then, Kazaya thought it was old melodrama. Now, it felt like prophecy. She dug out the diary and reread the cryptic entry over and over, ready to do anything for an heir. Anything she needed answers, real ones. And she knew exactly who might have them. Dr. Thaddeus, the old family doctor. A kind man, retired now, but trusted by both her family and the St. Clares. The next day she brought the children to his home office for a routine checkup, a perfect excuse. The visit began normally. He examined the children, praised their health. When they wandered off to stare at the fish tank, she finally spoke. Dr. Thaddeus, I found something. Pearl St. Clare's diary. He froze. Yes, he murmured. I remember her. There were strange things written about Zenobia, about her obsession with an heir, about Thomas having problems. It all sounded too familiar. Something in his expression broke. He took off his glasses, wiped them slowly, then put them back on with unsteady hands. Old matters, Kazaya, he said sharply. Why dig them up? Because I lived through the same obsession, she said. And then Xavier threw me out, called me useless. His face twitched. He glanced at the children, then back at her, regret filling his eyes. Minutes passed in silence before he finally exhaled. I was a fool, he whispered. I thought she was just being dramatic. But she came to my alone years before your divorce. He walked to the window, hand trembling. She brought stacks of Xavier's tests. Old results, new results. She demanded confirmation that her son had problems. I told her nothing was conclusive, but she didn't care. He turned toward her, voice hollow. She asked about donor clinics, about other methods, discreet methods. She had this wild look in her eyes. I threw her out. I thought she'd calm down. He swallowed hard. She didn't. Kazaya's blood ran cold. Zenobia had suspected Xavier was infertile years ago. She was hunting for a solution long before Kazaya was ever blamed. Suddenly everything clicked. The exile, the insults, the obsession, the pregnancy of the new wife, the panic over a DNA test? None of it was coincidence. Zenobia had a plan. Always had. Outside, the sun shone brightly. Children laughed. But the world around Kazaya tilted. If Xavier couldn't father children, then whose child was Soraya carrying? And who fathered her children? Cold fear slid down her spine. A memory sparked, the lake house party. Xavier purposely drunk. The bitter water Langston gave her. The dizziness. The intrusive help. She rushed home, dug through old photos, and found one barely noticed before. She zoomed in. There she was, exhausted, with Langston beside her holding that strange glass of water, but behind them, reflected in a mirror figure. A woman, hidden in the hallway, watching. Zenobia, and suddenly, the whole truth slammed into her. Zenobia hadn't been waiting for fate to give her an heir. She had been creating one. And Kazaya had been a part of that plan without knowing. The conspiracy was real. It was vile. And it was just beginning to unfold. Zenobia stood apart from the laughter. Hidden in the shadows, her eyes fixed on Kazaya and Langston. There was no worry on her face for her sick daughter, in-lawnly a cold, sharp, predatory focus. She watched them not like family, but like a scientist observing lab mice. She didn't just understand what was happening, she had engineered it. This moment was the result she'd been waiting for. Her plan, simple and monstrous, finally revealed itself. She had chosen Kazaya as an incubator, and Langston, her own nephew, with the needed bloodline as the discreet donor. She removed the drunk, incapacitated husband, left the weakened wife alone with the caring relative, and then personally observed the execution of her scheme. But something failed. Maybe Kazaya wasn't as weak as she expected. Maybe Langston didn't have the nerve. Whatever the reason, Zenobia assumed the attempt was unsuccessful and dismissed Kazaya as worthless, ordering her son to throw her out. What she didn't know was that Kazaya was already pregnant, not with Langston's child, but with the child of her own infertile son. 3 years later, when Kazaya returned with 2 children, Zenobia's world cracked. She became convinced they were Langston's. Believing her plan had worked after Albert, she no longer controlled the outcome. That was why she screamed they were another man's children. That was why she clawed so desperately to deny them. And that was why Soraya trembled at the thought of a DNA test, because it would expose everything, showing that the children weren't Langston, and destroy the lies Zenobia had spent years constructing. Kazaya leaned back, heart pounding. The monster she feared had finally shown its true face. And now she knew its name, its plan, and she held the weapon to destroy it. A single photo, an undeniable reflection of truth. Staring at the magnified mirror image on her laptop, fear dissolved into a clear, icy rage. She finally saw the full machinery of the deception. She hadn't just suffered family drama, she had been chosen as a vessel, used for a purpose, and discarded when she didn't fit. But she had not broken, and now she had everything she needed. The diary, the confession, the photograph. But how to use it? The police wouldn't care about old family scandals. Xavier would never believe her. His mother ruled him completely. This required more than justice. It needed destruction, a public reckoning. Zenobia couldn't escape. The idea came instantly. Her bakery back in Savannah often held charity events. If she organized a charity auction here, one the city's elite couldn't ignore, the St. Clare family would be forced to attend. All of them. Zenobia, Xavier, Soraya, Langston. It would be their stage, and her execution ground. With her mother recovering and moved to a regular room, Kazaya threw herself into preparations. With help from her father and old friends, she booked a small, elegant hall, gathered local artists and craftsmen for auction items, and sent invitations. Her return alone was enough to spark the city's curiosity. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had come back with children and dragged her ex-husband into court. Scandal was irresistible bait. She worked tirelessly, days spent organizing, nights spent with her mother and children. No time for fear, only strategy. The biggest battle of her life was coming. The night before the auction, she returned home exhausted. Her father had already put the children to bed. She sat in the kitchen with cold tea, rehearsing her plan again and again. Tomorrow would change everything. A soft, frantic knock broke the silence. Kazaya froze, looked through the peephole. Soraya, coat forgotten, tears running, mascara smeared, hair a mess. She looked like someone on the edge of collapse. Kazaya opened the door. "What now?" she said tiredly. "Did you bring more money?" Soraya didn't respond. She walked inside, dropped into a chair, and burst into violent, shaking sobs. Not the quiet ones from before. This was hysteria, raw and breaking. Kazaya hesitated, torn between throwing her out and pitying the shattered woman trembling before her. "Calm down," she said at last, softer than she meant. "You'll wake the children." "What happened?" "She knows," Soraya whispered. "She knows everything." "About the auction?" "No." Her voice cracked. "She said if I don't show up tomorrow and act perfectly, she'll destroy me. Destroy my family. My father." She sobbed again. "I can't do it anymore. This isn't life, it's a prison." Kazaya slid a glass of water toward her. "Drink. Start from the beginning. What is she holding over you?" Soraya took several shaky sips, enough to steady her voice. "My father had huge business debts. Zenobia paid them. And in return, I had to marry Xavier. A contract marriage. Predictable. But not the whole story. I was supposed to be the perfect wife," she continued hollowly. "Have an heir, hold up the family's image. Xavier didn't care, he only obeys her. There's nothing inside him." She wiped her face, gathering strength. "Then you came back with the children." She lost her mind. "She said you would ruin everything, that people would start questioning whether Xavier could even father a child. And then, she made this plan." Her voice faltered. Her eyes begged forgiveness. "I'm not pregnant, Kazaya." The world seemed to tilt. "What?" Kazaya whispered. Soraya stood. She unzipped her dress. Beneath it was a harness, straps holding a perfectly molded silicone belly. She removed it and placed it on the table. Her stomach was flat. Kazaya stared between the fake belly and Soraya, speechless. "She bought it in New York," Soraya said. "Forced me to wear it. Made her doctor confirm the pregnancy. She wanted to fake a birth, say the baby died, invent anything just to create the illusion, just to erase your truth." Soraya collapsed into the chair again, completely drained. I can't do this anymore. Tomorrow she forced me to smile, pretend to be happy, stand there like her puppet, and I want it to end. She lifted her tear-stained face. I'll help you. I'll do whatever you say. Just finish her. Burn her down, please. In that moment, Kazaya understood she had gained the most unexpected and powerful ally. The woman she once saw as a rival was not an enemy at all, she was another prisoner. Another victim trapped inside a different cage. The same monster had tried to destroy both of them. Now they stood together, and tomorrow's reckoning would be final. Kazaya didn't sleep that night. After Soraya left, she remained in the kitchen, staring at the silicone pregnancy belly lying on the table. That lifeless prop was the perfect symbol of Zenobia's madness, her cruelty, her manipulation, her obsession. With Soraya's confession, Kazaya's plan sharpened. It grew colder, more controlled. She no longer had just proof of an old conspiracy. She had evidence of an ongoing lie, a ticking time bomb. The next evening, the banquet hall overflowed with the city's elite. Officials, businessmen, their jeweled wives, everyone came to witness the scandal disguised as charity. Kazaya felt their curious glances, heard the murmurs, but inside she was calm with that sharp, icy stillness that comes right before a leap into the unknown. Then she saw them. The St. Clare family sat at the front table like royalty on display. Zenobia, elegant and rigid in deep wine-colored silk. Xavier beside her, wearing an expression that was more mask than smile. Soraya, on his other side, dressed in flowing fabric that perfectly hid her false pregnancy, pale, trembling, but determined. Langston sat slightly apart, sipping champagne with smug confidence. They looked perfect, polished, untouchable. The auction began. And when Kazaya stepped onto the stage to give her opening speech, every eye in the hall locked onto her. Zenobia's lips curved into a tiny smirk, as if expecting Kazaya to beg or crumble. Instead, Kazaya spoke with quiet power. She thanked the crowd, spoke briefly about helping children, and then paused. Children are our greatest treasure, she said, but for some people, the desire for an heir becomes a dangerous obsession, so dangerous that they destroy lives to fulfill it. The hall stirred. Zenobia's smirk vanished. Kazaya continued, voice firm. She told them how she had been humiliated 3 years earlier, blamed for infertility, thrown out like trash by her own husband and his mother. Shock rippled through the crowd. Zenobia sat unmoving, but fury blazed in her eyes. Then Kazaya revealed the truth that Zenobia had always believed Xavier was infertile and secretly arranged for Langston to father an heir through her. Gasps filled the room. Langston leaped to his feet, shouting denial, but Kazaya shut him down by displaying the damning mirror photograph on the giant screen behind her, and then Soraya rose. Slowly, trembling, she removed her shawl and lifted her dress, exposing her perfectly flat stomach. The hall erupted in chaos. Phones flashed like lightning. Voices rose in disbelief. This entire pregnancy is a lie, Soraya cried. Zenobia forced me to wear a fake belly to protect her son's image and destroy Kazaya's truth. It was over. The conspiracy crumbled in seconds. Langston collapsed into his chair, mumbling. Zenobia sat frozen, staring into nothing. Her empire of manipulation had collapsed before the entire city. Kazaya walked to Xavier's table, leaned close, and quietly delivered the final blow. She showed him the pregnancy test she had taken 3 years ago before the lake house incident, the DNA results proving that Kenzo and Kalia were his children. The heirs he abandoned because he believed his mother's lies. Then she turned her back on him forever. She left the hall without looking back as the room dissolved into reporters, shouting, chaos. Outside, she inhaled the cool night air. It was finished. The next morning she brought her mother home from the hospital. A week later, when the scandal finally began to fade, she took her children back to Savannah, to her bakery, to her peace. She never saw the St. Clairs again. Only rumors drifted to her: Zenobia selling her house, the family business collapsing, Soraya filing for divorce, Xavier drowning himself in alcohol. But none of it mattered anymore. In her apartment, she took Pearl St. Claire's diary and the photograph from her suitcase and tucked them into a box on the highest shelf. Not destroyed, just buried. The past no longer had power over her. That evening, she deleted her ex-husband's number. Then she stood by the window, looking at the lights of her city, her life, her future. She was free. Kazaya's story was a journey from humiliation to triumph, from being crushed by a single cruel word to finding unbreakable strength. It's a reminder that betrayal wounds deeply, whether it comes from calculated evil, like Zenobia's, or weak silence like but it also shows how pain can become armor, how enemies can become allies, and how justice can rise from the ashes. Did you enjoy the story? And which city are you listening from? If you liked it, a super thanks helps me keep creating more stories. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. On the screen are 2 more life stories I think you'll love. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next one.